Sumerian tablet that actually shows the Tree of Life, flanked by divine beings. You can see here the Anunnaki on each side.
For over 150 years, the British Museum has quietly guarded a 5,000-year-old clay disc that still confuses modern science. It's known as the Sumerian Planisphere, and some believe it records a real cosmic event, not a myth. But what if this ancient star chart is not history, but a warning? Why would early humans map something so precise in the sky? And what did they see that we're only starting to understand today? But what if the hidden planet everyone is looking for isn't the one you've been told about? The artifact in the dark. The answer lies not in internet rumors, but buried deep within the ruins of the Library of Ashurbanipal, where a 5,000-year-old warning was pressed into clay and left to sleep beneath layers of dust and ash. Long before modern telescopes, long before space agencies, someone sat under the night sky and recorded something they believed mattered enough to last forever. That object is known today as Tablet K8538, quietly stored inside the British Museum.
Having opened a bottle of bubbly and danced around in the gallery, the time came to think very seriously about what this meant, because the tablet is very famous.
It does not look like much at first glance. It is dark, worn, almost burned at the edges, like it survived something violent. The surface is rough, scratched, and uneven. Time has not been kind to it, but when you look closer, the chaos disappears. Because hidden inside that worn surface is a level of precision that should not exist for its time. This tablet was uncovered in the 19th century by Austin Henry Layard during excavations in ancient Nineveh. It was just one of thousands of clay fragments pulled from the ruins. At the time, no one realized what they were holding. For years, it sat among other artifacts, untranslated, unstudied, almost forgotten. And that is what makes this even more unsettling. Something this detailed stayed ignored for over a century. When researchers finally began to study it properly, they noticed something strange. The tablet is divided into 8 clear segments, almost like slices of a pie. Each section is filled with tiny markings and angular lines. These are not random carvings. They follow patterns. They align. They connect. This is not art. This is not storytelling. This is a calculation. Experts believe this is a planisphere, a map of the sky. But not just a simple star map. It appears to record positions, angles, and movements. In simple terms, it is trying to show how objects in the sky were moving at a specific moment in time. That alone raises questions. Because to map the sky like this, you need observation over long periods. You need consistency. You need an understanding of motion. Have you ever wondered how a civilization that just invented the wheel could possess this kind of advanced astronomical knowledge? Think about it for a second. No telescopes, no satellites, no computers, just human eyes, patience, and something else we still do not fully understand. And yet here they were, carving the sky with a level of detail that feels almost modern. The lines on the tablet are not decorative. They are geometric. Some researchers argue they represent angles of observation. Others believe they track the path of an object moving across the sky. And this is where things start to get uncomfortable, because this is not just about stars sitting still in the night. This looks like something was moving, something important enough to record with urgency. What could possibly possess ancient sky watchers to carve this specific night sky with such intense precision? There is also something else. The tablet does not try to explain itself. There is no story written around it. No myth, no clear labels, just data. Raw, silent, mathematical data. And that silence speaks loudly. It suggests that whoever made it already understood what they were seeing. They were not guessing. They were documenting. For decades, mainstream researchers treated it as just another ancient artifact. Interesting, but not revolutionary. But outside academic circles, a different story began to grow. People started connecting it to lost knowledge, hidden planets, and ancient warnings. And that is where things took a sharp turn. For decades, fringe theorists claimed this tablet proved the existence of an alien homeworld. But how did one man manage to hijack ancient history and convince millions that this was something it was never meant to be? The Great Sitchin Hijack. To understand what the Sumerians actually saw, we first have to strip away the greatest mythological hijacking of the 20th century. Because before this tablet became a mystery about ancient astronomy, it became something else entirely. A viral story, a best-selling idea. And for decades, it quietly reshaped how millions of people think about ancient history. That story begins with Zecharia Sitchin, a writer who in 1976 introduced the world to a dramatic claim. According to him, ancient Sumerian texts described a hidden planet called Nibiru, home to a race of beings known as the Anunnaki.
I think, Dr. Harrington, you have a pretty good picture, at least in your own mind, of...
It sounded incredible. It felt cinematic. And most importantly, it spread fast. Books sold, videos multiplied, and eventually, the internet did what it does best. It copied, pasted, and amplified. But here is where things start to fall apart. Sitchin's entire argument leaned heavily on artifacts like the famous VA243 seal. At first glance, the image looks convincing. You see a large central circle surrounded by smaller dots. It feels obvious, right? A sun with planets orbiting around it, even 11 of them, which conveniently fits the idea of a hidden extra planet. Except that is not what the seal actually shows. Scholars who specialize in ancient Mesopotamian languages, including Michael S. Heiser, took a closer look at the original inscriptions, and what they found was much less mysterious, but far more important. The symbols do not describe planets at all. The smaller dots are not orbiting objects. They are stars. Simple star symbols are used across multiple ancient texts. The large circle is not even confirmed to be the sun in the way we imagine it today. It is a symbolic representation, not a scientific diagram of the solar system. And the word Nibiru itself? It does appear in ancient texts, but not as a rogue planet. It is used to describe a crossing point or a bright celestial object, often linked to known stars or planets like Jupiter, depending on the context. In simple terms, the entire hidden planet Nibiru narrative was built on a misunderstanding of language. And here is the part that makes it almost unbelievable. This interpretation has been corrected for years. Academic papers have explained it. Linguists have broken it down clearly. Yet the internet keeps recycling the same story like it is brand new. You have probably seen it yourself. The same diagrams, the same claims, the same dramatic voiceovers. Isn't it crazy how one mistranslated book from the 1970s spawned a 50-year internet conspiracy? Now, this does not mean the Sumerians knew nothing about the sky. In fact, it is the opposite. They were careful observers. They tracked patterns. They recorded movements, but they were not describing alien planets visiting Earth every few thousand years. That idea was layered on top of their work much later. And this is where things get interesting again, because once you remove the noise, once you clear out the exaggerated claims, you are left with something more grounded, something real, and honestly, something more unsettling. If Nibiru was just a myth, then what massive object or event was actually important enough for them to record with such precision? Because remember, that tablet we talked about earlier is not telling a story. It is documenting a moment, a specific configuration in the sky, something that happened, something they saw. And when researchers began aligning those markings with real astronomical data, a new possibility started to form. Not about alien homeworlds, but about a rare and potentially dangerous cosmic event. So if they were not looking at a planet of gods, what exactly were they tracking on that fateful night around 3123 BC? The Kepler's trajectory, a cosmic black box. They were not mapping a planet, they were calculating a countdown. And once you see it that way, everything about that tablet starts to feel different. The clean divisions, the sharp angles, the quiet urgency in those markings. It no longer looks like a peaceful star chart. It looks like someone is tracking something that was getting closer. In 2008, two aerospace engineers, Alan Bond and Mark Hempsel, decided to take this ancient object seriously. Not as mythology, not as speculation, but as data. They treated tablet K8538 like a black box from an ancient disaster. Something recorded in real time, waiting to be decoded. And what they found changed the entire conversation. Using orbital simulation software, the same kind used to track satellites and asteroids today, they began matching the tablet's markings to real star positions. Slowly, piece by piece, the puzzle started to align. The angles matched, the segments made sense, and eventually, the data pointed to a very specific date, June 29th, 3123 BC. That is not a random guess. That is a calculated moment in time when the sky looked exactly like what is carved on that tablet. Think about that for a second. A clay disk from thousands of years ago is lining up with modern computer models. But the real shock was not the date. It was what appeared in that sky. According to their reconstruction, the tablet was tracking a massive object entering Earth's atmosphere. Not a planet, not a distant star. Something much closer, something moving fast, on a steep trajectory, cutting across the sky like a blade. An asteroid, and not a small one. We are talking about something mountain-sized. Imagine the scene. A quiet night over ancient Mesopotamia. Then suddenly, a second light appears. At first, it looks like a star, but brighter. Then it grows. It moves. It burns. The sky itself starts to change. Can you imagine standing on a ziggurat, watching a second sun tear across the sky, knowing it was heading toward Earth? The engineers believe this object skimmed the atmosphere at a shallow angle, creating intense heat and pressure. Instead of a simple impact crater, it likely exploded or fragmented as it traveled, releasing massive energy across the surface. Its final path, based on the calculations, points toward what is now Kepler's in Austria. Today, that region shows signs of a violent geological event. Melted rock, unusual terrain, evidence that something extreme happened there long ago. This is where the story stops being abstract and starts feeling real. Picture the heat of it. The sky glowing orange, the ground trembling, a shockwave racing across land faster than sound, forests flattened, air igniting. For people watching from a distance, it would not look like an impact. It would look like the world itself was breaking apart. And somewhere, someone was watching closely enough to record it. Not after the fact, not as a myth, but as it happened, tracking its path, marking its position, and capturing the movement step by step. That is what makes this tablet so unsettling. It feels immediate, like a live report carved into clay. If the Sumerians recorded an asteroid with this level of detail, why do people still cling to the idea of a hidden planet? Because honestly, the real explanation is not less dramatic. It is more. A rogue object entering Earth's atmosphere is not just a story. It is a reminder of how vulnerable we are. It is something that can happen again. And here is where things take another turn. Because an asteroid explains what they saw. It explains the urgency. It explains the precision. But it does not explain one critical thing. What pushed that object onto a collision path with Earth in the first place? Because space is not random chaos. Objects follow paths. They get pulled, nudged, redirected. So what force was strong enough to send something that large directly toward our planet? This is where ancient records and modern space data begin to overlap in a way that is hard to ignore. Planet 9 and the gravity anchor.
Astronomical references, a moon, a star, various symbols, which even could be symbolized as a wristwatch. Technology being used 6,000 years ago.
They weren't mapping a planet, they were calculating a countdown. What if everything we thought about that ancient tablet was flipped upside down? Not a map of gods, not a hidden planet, but a warning. A ticking clock, carved into clay by someone who knew exactly what was coming. And once you see it this way, the entire story shifts from myth to survival. Back in 2008, two aerospace engineers, Alan Bond and Mark Hempsel, decided to do something no one had seriously done before. They took the K8538 tablet, that same mysterious Sumerian star chart, and ran it through modern orbital trajectory software. Not guesswork, not internet theories, real calculations, real physics. And what came out shocked even them. The tablet didn't describe a planet, it described an event. Their models pointed to a specific date, June 29th, 3123 BC. Not a random guess, but a precise alignment of stars and positions that matched what was etched into the clay. Think about that for a second. An ancient civilization, thousands of years ago, recorded the sky with enough accuracy that modern software can verify it. But here is where it gets intense. The object in that sky was not a distant star or a wandering planet. It was something much closer, much faster, and much more dangerous. According to the analysis, the tablet maps the path of a massive asteroid entering Earth's atmosphere. Not a small rock. We are talking about something mountain-sized, tearing through the sky at extreme speed. Can you imagine standing on a ziggurat, watching a second sun tear across the sky, knowing it was about to hit the Earth? Picture it clearly. The night sky suddenly turned bright, a blazing object growing larger by the second. Heat is building in the air. People looked up, confused at first, then terrified, and somewhere in that chaos, an astronomer is trying to record it. Not calmly, not perfectly, but urgently, pressing symbols into wet clay as the sky burns above him. That is what makes this feel real. This was not art. This was documentation. The trajectory, calculated from the tablet, leads straight toward what we now call Kofels in modern-day Austria. Today, that site is known for a massive landslide and unusual geological features. For years, scientists debated what caused it. But this model suggests something far more dramatic: an atmospheric explosion, an impact event so intense that it did not leave a classic crater, but instead unleashed a blast powerful enough to reshape the landscape. Imagine the shockwave, the fireball, the plume rising into the sky like a pillar of destruction. This wasn't just a rock falling. This was a moment that could have changed entire civilizations. And suddenly, the Sumerian tablet starts to make sense. Not as a myth, not as a story about gods, but as a record of a real disaster, a cosmic event, witnessed, feared, and preserved. Now here is the question that should be bothering you. If the Sumerians recorded an asteroid with this level of detail, why do so many people still insist the chart points to a hidden planet? How did we ignore something this grounded and replace it with something so dramatic but less supported? And maybe the bigger question is this: what if this wasn't a one-time event? Because asteroids don't just randomly appear on a perfect collision path. They get pushed, they get redirected. Something influences them. So what exactly threw that asteroid toward Earth in the first place? That is where things start to connect in a way most people never see coming. Ancient records on one side, modern space data on the other, and right in the middle, a pattern that is getting harder to ignore. Why NASA ignores the connection? It's not about hiding aliens. It's about managing panic. Because once you connect the dots properly, the story stops being entertainment and starts becoming a real-world problem. Not a myth, not a conspiracy for clicks, but something that agencies actually have to think about carefully before saying anything out loud. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Modern space agencies already track near-Earth objects every single day. They calculate orbits, predict close passes, and even run simulations of impact scenarios. That part is public. That part is normal. But the moment you connect that work to an ancient record that may describe a past impact tied to a repeating pattern, everything changes. Now it is no longer about if, it becomes about when. Think about it. If a massive object in deep space can influence asteroid paths, and if that influence follows a long orbit, then impacts would not be random. They would come in cycles. Rare, yes, but predictable over thousands of years. And suddenly, that old Sumerian tablet does not look like a story anymore. It looks like a timestamp. This is why the connection stays ignored. Not because it sounds crazy, but because it sounds too serious. Governments and space agencies deal with risk differently than YouTube does. They do not throw out dramatic conclusions without layers of proof. And more importantly, they do not spark global fear unless they are absolutely certain. Imagine announcing that an ancient doomsday clock might actually be real. What happens next? Markets react. People panic. Misinformation spreads faster than facts. And before you even have a confirmed timeline, the situation becomes chaos. So instead, the approach is quiet, controlled, focused on preparation, not headlines. And this is where the actions speak louder than the words. Over the past few years, planetary defense programs have received more funding, more attention, and more urgency than ever before. Missions are being designed to test asteroid deflection. Detection systems are improving. Telescopes are scanning deeper into the outer solar system. On the surface, it looks like normal scientific progress, but underneath, it tells a different story. They are not just watching space, they are preparing for what might come out of it. At the same time, the ancient connection is kept at a distance. The Sumerian tablet stays in the category of history, not hazard. The narrative stays separated. Old world on one side, modern science on the other. No overlap, no official link. But you can feel the tension between the two, because one side shows us a possible past event, recorded in clay, and the other side shows us a present effort to prevent something similar. When you place them together, the picture becomes hard to ignore. So let me ask you something. If you were running a global space agency, would you openly tell people that a pattern like this might exist, even if you were still studying it? Or would you focus on building the tools quietly, just in case? Because the truth might not be hidden. It might just be handled carefully. And that leaves us right here, between what was written in stone and what is moving silently through space, waiting to be understood. But here is the part that stays with you. What if this is not just a theory, but a countdown we are already inside? Are we on the verge of uncovering the gravity anchor, or is it already shaping events quietly? And if Planet 9 is real, will we see it first, or feel its effects? Tell me what you think below. If this opened your mind, like, subscribe, and stay close. The next truth might not wait.